Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me start with the first step, creation of the project. So if you want to enable a DevOps process, first step here is creating the process in DevOps system. So that we can do from here. Okay, so there is already a project created here, Drive Salesforce. As I'm not an admin here, I don't have access to creation of the project. It's just we can, with just one click, we can create a project. Let me show you how we can create in my personal org. So just new project and enter the project name and select the Git repository, what you want to follow, just create, that's it. So once project creation is done, yeah, so now project is created. Each project will be associated with a single master repository. So we have to create a master repository now. So yeah, so we have during creation of the repository, we have two ways. Either we can initiate an empty repository, or we can create a new complete master repository using the existing code. So just I'm initializing now for empty repository. So that's it. So we have created a master repository, which is basically empty now, as it is a as we just created. So let me show you how it is in Veritas Investments. So these are the things. These are the this is the branch master repository I have created. You can see now.
Right.
So now we have created a project and we have created a repository. The next step is we have to link Azure and Gearset so that we can enable integration between these two systems. So just log into Gearset, and then we have to navigate to source control and services. So Gearset will display all the integrations available. Just we have to let me remove this and set up this. So just you need to click this link, connect to Azure DevOps. If it is already connected, it will just establish the connection without asking any authorization. If it is not connected, it will ask you to authorize by entering a username and password of Azure DevOps using SSO. So let me show you that how it works for GitHub. That's it. Just enter the, so I think not this one. Yeah. So it will just take you to the Azure DevOps login page. Once you click the connect Azure Azure DevOps, then there you need to input your username and password. Then connection is established. Okay. Now this one is done. Linking Azure and DevOps. Next, so let's say that if you want to, we want to introduce some new feature, let's say that we have to create some new field. So that is our request we have for from business. So what we do is when we get new request, so we have to create a branch from master here. So just I'll create a new field branch. So whenever we want to enable, we want to introduce new features. So we have to create a new branch from the master branch, and once we are done with that work inside that branch, we have to merge it with master. So now I have created a new branch, new field branch, basically which I use it for creating new field and merge it with master. Okay, so before this, to enable CI/CD process, I want to set up a CI/CD job, which basically does automatic deployment. So to set up CI/CD job, we have to navigate to continuous integration menu here. Then just add new deployment job. So for demo purpose, already there is a branch created called CI/CD. Already there is a branch. There is a sandbox called CI/CD, which I have created from production. At the same time, we have one more sandbox called VA/UAT. Now let's say that I'm going to create a new field. That is a new feature which we are introducing in a CI/CD branch, and then we want to move it to VI/UAT using CI/CD job. So now, before, so instead of moving from CI/CD to this one now VI/UAT, we are going to move it to master. Once we move it to master branch, there is a automatic job scheduled which deploys using a CI/CD job. So to schedule that, we have to configure all these details. Okay. Then I'm configuring a job here. Here I'm selecting Azure DevOps as a master branch, this Azure as a source, and whenever some changes are introduced into this branch, we have to do automatic deployment to VI/UAT sandbox. So select the branch, and target type is Salesforce because we want to deploy to UAT, and then select VI/UAT. And so we want to run this job when some changes are merged into master branch, and select save. So whenever you save the continuous integration job, it will ask you to set up a webhooks. Actually, I don't have access to setting up webhooks. If I had access, I would have got an option here to set up webhooks automatically. GitHub itself will set up automatically. Currently, as I don't have access, this Gearset is not showing option to create automatic webhooks. So this is the process. This will be done by some Azure team. So once this webhook is finished, our CI/CD job is ready, and it will be listening to any merge events at the master branch. Immediately when merge happened at master branch, it will start deploying to VI/UAT branch. So you can see here, I already deployed multiple things. If you go to history, so this is the recent job which I have deployed. So it is deployed from master branch to VI/UAT. So let me show you how it works exactly now. Okay, now I'm going to CI/CD. Just I'll be creating one field for demo purpose, or I think okay, let me create a new field. So So now I have created a new feature called a test field in CI/CD box. Now I want to move it to VI UAT. So to move that to VI UAT, we should not directly move it to VI UAT. We have to use Azure DevOps for that and a CI/CD job. So let me show you how we can do that. So first thing is we have to deploy from CI/CD sandbox to master branch. So then automatically a CI/CD job will deploy it to UAT branch, UAT sandbox. So we have now we have created a new field in CI/CD box. And we need to deploy it to so we need to deploy it to new field branch. And here we have to select the components which we want for comparison, custom field, and so Gearset will automatically fetch the metadata from source and targets, and it will does the comparison. Once comparison done, it will just list out the components. What are the changed components? What are the new items introduced in the next screen? So currently it's just fetching the data, fetching the metadata.
So basically, while this is running its job, there's kind of two parts to this. And one is really like when you're introducing like a new field or some other configuration metadata to the app. And then the other part is when you are basically writing code. So you can, every time you would deploy to your cloud repo like Azure DevOps, then that would automatically be merged, or basically there will be automatically communication to Gearset for future deployments or merging those branches. So there's kind of basically two approaches. Technically, as a developer, some of the times you don't necessarily have to worry about being in Gearset directly, because once you merge your branch, the CI/CD pipeline kicks in and just does it all automatically for you.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So just to kind of step back, like, so the workflow here is if you were making sort of field metadata changes, object changes, you can do that actually in the org and then use this to sync it to your source control repository, and that at the same time that will deploy it to the target environment. Is that accurate?
That's true, yes. So instead of using like change sets, this is basically the process you would have to do.
Right, which then makes it a lot easier because change sets are a bit more cumbersome and yeah. So then and we don't, obviously we can kind of get through this particular approach, but if you were doing Apex changes where you're architecting, you're writing those in a source control like editor IDE like VS Code, then those would also get you could use the same methodology, although it would be slightly different because you might sync it with another org, like a dev
Yeah.
org, and then choose to then merge it with your main branch.
Yeah, generally you would, I'll let Sridhar finish his demo, but generally you would basically have like kind of like a master branch, which will be
Yep.
like really the production branch. And then you would have like basically like a UAT environment, which would be like a full copy. And then you would, it would have its own sort of like master branch, which would be like second in hierarchy to the production branch, obviously. And then on another tier, you would have like a general dev branch where you would actually push development changes. Once they're QA, then you would push it to UAT. So for that approach, every new feature, as Sridhar was showing earlier, would have its own branch. So basically, like for example, as a developer, if you're building something in your VI UAT environment, for example, and I basically write a new trigger and I push this code, basically I do like a git push to like basically push it to my cloud repo. And before I can actually run a pull request, for example, it would have to be reviewed by like 1 or 2 peers. And then once that's reviewed and it's checked off, then it would merge with that specific VI UAT branch. And that would actually kick off this whole like CI/CD pipeline, because they have these webhooks set up to where they're listening to these events that are happening. So once the merge happens, then it just deploys a whole job that goes kind of propagates through the whole system until it hits basically the Salesforce environment. So then the next developer, when you're writing something, you're going to pull this latest version of your master branch for that specific environment where you're deploying, and build a new feature and follow the same process.
So just at a high level, when you have these different branches, so if I'm with a team of a lot of different developers, there are going to be sort of branches that represent each environment.
Yeah.
And then will there be like sort of sub branches that need to be merged for particular, like if I'm developing
environment. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking like within an environment, if I'm developing a particular feature, would I create another branch for that feature and then merge it back to the branch for that environment?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so and then I could merge that branch to the main branch if I want to. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like in like standard sort of like development process, like you have like, for example, like a UAT environment and production environment. So technically, even if it's not Salesforce, so like, and you have multiple developers working towards UAT, so that means that you have to first merge all of their code inside that specific environment or that server that you're using for UAT. And then you have someone that once it kind of runs its business processes, whatever, someone that's more in charge of DevOps, taking that code and basically deploying it to your production server. And so that's what you would do here too, is like, you wouldn't have anyone merging their kind of feature branch code into your production. They would be always merging it into one of the sandboxes. But then when you're deploying from a sandbox to production or sandbox to sandbox, then your DevOps manager, like quote unquote, would be the person that would be taking that whole thing and merging it.
I think that's a great point, meaning that you're probably going to have a limited number in charge of handling this aspect of it, right? Doing the right. And because you want to have fairly rigid controls around how and when and who gets to deploy code between environments.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. And given the fact that we only have a limited number of gear set licenses, I think that probably works well anyway. Yeah.
So this, a lot of this sort of branching strategy is per environment. So that we've been sort of showcasing and discussing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like this a lot because it means that so you effectively you have GearSet as a front end to committing changes to your various repositories, well, various branches within your repository. And then you can also separately use VS Code to commit changes, like if you're coding Apex or triggers or whatever. Okay,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then all the same assets that GearSet has managed will also be visible in I guess in your VS Code, or would that be different? That's the part I'm kind of curious about.
No, I don't know if they have if you mean if they have like maybe an extension that for like VS Code, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess
That's a good question.
one part that's not clear to me, and maybe this will become clearer when you guys kind of progress through the demo, is like, so the repository contains a bunch of code that's, includes things like XML metadata that's been synchronized using GearSet, and it also has code assets like Apex classes. I'm curious about the experience when you're in VS Code, like, because you're linked to that repository, I guess, what do you see?
Matt, I want to show you some diagram here so that
Sure.
you will get some clarity.
Okay.
So this one, if you can see here, so this is the development and deployment process, what I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see here, so we will be creating feature branches. Let's say that if you want to enhance our application, we will be creating a feature branch, and every developer will be working in a separate sandbox connecting with a feature branch. So this feature branch, this one and this one. So developer 1 will be working here, developer 2 will be working here, and so our VS Code, this one you can see here, right? So VS Code is connected to both sandbox and feature branch.
Mm-hmm.
So you will be able to access all the artifacts of programming, like Apex class, VF pages, LWC components, everything you will be able to create from Visual Studio Code, and you can push it to sandbox directly from VS Code. Okay, so once your development is done, a developer is going to move the code to UAT branch. Basically, UAT branch is another branch which we are going to have in Azure repository.
Yeah.
So once, once we code review is done and merge conflicts are resolved, there will be a job which takes care of deploying from UAT branch to UAT sandbox. So basically, UAT sandbox is where user actually tests. So once testing is done, so manually you have developers have to move from commit the code from UAT branch to master branch. Again, when committing is done to master branch, CI/CD job will step in and will create automatic deployment from master branch to production.
That sounds good. And so I guess what I'm hearing is like the process of merging the feature branches into the UAT branch and the UAT branch into the master branch, those would be managed through GearSet.
Yeah.
And then you were mentioning that there was a way, like within a feature branch, I can commit code to a sandbox directly from Visual Studio. Is that, or from VS Code?
Yes.
Okay.
So VS Code is always connected to sandbox and feature branch.
Right.
So whenever you save the details, whenever you save some Apex class or create some Apex class, it is always tracked in feature branch and saved to sandbox.
makes sense. And then if you are, just to understand sort of the overall workflow, so that would apply to writing Apex code, you know, triggers and classes and so forth, and committing those. If you're doing the workflow around like creating new objects and new fields, you know, in your sandbox org, you would do those directly in Salesforce.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And then when you go to do the gear set merge of the feature branch to the UAT branch, you would then merge, you know, you would get all of those differences through gear set. So there's really kind of, you know, two workflows. One is, you know, when you're writing code, you're doing that in Visual Studio. When you're creating objects and fields and those sorts of assets in, you would be doing that in the sandbox directly.
Yes, Matt.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
Okay. So now I have added all the components which I need to deploy. So directly I am deploying to this feature branch called new field.
Mm-hmm.
So deployment is done. I will go to this new field. This is a feature branch.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see here we have deployed our changes just now. So what we can do is we can create a pull request. So to merge our code to master branch. Okay, now I'm creating. Actually here, how it helps here is we can senior developers can review junior developers code, and they can add comments before merging the code to master branch. Yeah, I think that's it. So we can add, basically we can add comments so which actually bring us quality of the code. So
Right, that makes sense. So you could have somebody who's responsible for the merge, who is, you know, performing the code review, potentially other than the developer who actually created the feature branch.
Yes, Matt. Yes. So you can assign the reviewers here. So you can, I think we can configure like without code reviewing, we cannot merge with main branch. So we can configure that kind of settings. Currently, we don't have that, but we can do that. Okay. So here just I have added new field. That's why I don't need any code review kind of thing, because it is applicable only for custom code. So just I'm directly approving it and merging with a master branch by clicking complete button.
Now, Sridhar, in the case of like, if we were doing Apex and we were merging, and there was a conflict when we were merging our feature branch with the main branch, would there be some kind of, you know, like merge reconcile kind of operation that would be surfaced from here?
Yes, so I understand. So when merge conflicts are occurred, so we have to resolve those merge conflicts, then only deployments are allowed.
Got it.
So because so unless you resolve the merge conflicts, approver is not going to approve the pull request.
Got it. Okay.
So once approved, then only we can merge it. So that we are enforcing a condition here to protect our orgs from merge conflicts.
Yeah.
So,
and then generally you would also run so before merging the code in an actual like main branch or master branch, you would run first like a validation process or validation job for the deployment. Before you merge someone's code, you want to make sure that it's validated and then run all the checks.
Yeah, that makes sense, Book. I think I understand like what you're saying, which is you would go through the process of using GearSet to
Exactly.
deploy the changes from your feature branch to another org. You're gonna see all those validation issues and have to address them first.
Yeah.
And then from once you've satisfied those conditions, then you can do your pull request.
Yeah, exactly.
Got
I mean, you could have like a branch where you can merge other branches and not worry about validation, but generally, if you're merging it into like a main environment, then like a sandbox, then you would. Anyway, Sridhar, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's where the sort of having somebody responsible for
exactly
checking and tracking all those changes, so that there's it's not the Wild West. You can that seems valuable.
Okay. Now I have merged with main branch. Now our CI/CD job should step in and deploy from main branch to VI UAT sandbox. So let's go to our job where we configure. So we can see here, we have configured here. So you can see here, it's already started deploying. Currently it's downloading metadata. Once it's downloaded metadata, it will deploy to VI UAT box.
Oh, interesting. So it's actually the GearSet is automatically picking up those changes because you did a commit to Azure, and then the webhook told GearSet that change has been made, and now it's forcing the deployment.
Yes, Book. So when I say here CI/CD job, so that is what we have created now.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I thought that there was still a step to trigger that from the from GearSet, but it sounds like that since we're doing that pull request, it's automatically told GearSet to go ahead and do that.
Yes, Matt. Yes.
Cool. That's pretty slick.
So actually, GearSet makes our life so easy, because deployment with ChainSet is very difficult. Adding components and finding dependent components. So it's very difficult actually. Everything is kind of a manual work. Whereas in case of GearSet, it provides many features. So it's basically it's easy developer life.
Yeah, most definitely. That's really interesting. So just from a practical standpoint, when you guys are using these types of approaches, do you kind of keep the GearSet, like this particular view, would you keep that open just to kind of validate and confirm that everything worked? I'm just trying to understand, from a workflow standpoint, you've been in Azure DevOps, you've committed your code to your feature branch, and then you've completed your pull request, which is going to trigger this. Is it part of your workflow then just to sort of come into GearSet just to verify that everything deployed successfully?
Not necessarily. You can use in the background, but generally, you can see when you, as a developer, if you're pushing code to Azure DevOps, you should see if something failed when you basically pushed your branch, or basically tried to merge your branch.
You would actually get some kind of indication in Azure DevOps as well.
Yeah, so I haven't really used as much. I use GitHub, but for example, you get everything in GitHub, even in your terminal, specifically about
it'll tell you
what happened.
If the deployment failed.
So for example, you don't even have to go into a different environment, because inside of the GitHub job that you're running, you're gonna get some notification from other environments, Netlify or AWS or Heroku, Salesforce, etc.
Yeah.
Matt,
or GearSet in this case.
Yeah, here also we can configure notifications during creation of the CI/CD job.
Oh, that
So you
makes
can-
sense. So you could actually sort of passively do it and then get an email that tells you whether it succeeded or failed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can even post to Slack or Teams message, or it can
Ooh.
post even Charter, Salesforce Charter.
Or just everywhere. Just
Yeah,
send
exactly.
messages to everything.
Yeah.
Text me it, chatter it to me.
You can like post it into Jira. I'm sure you can somewhere in DevOps see it in like something equivalent to Jira for
Well, it's
managing.
interesting because DevOps
work.
kind of has like its own, Jira-like functionality, like,
Yeah,
boards and like Kanban boards and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's probably, create a bug or something. Who knows? Yeah. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yes, Matt, we can also link this Gearset deployment with Jira as well.
yeah,
So we can link to Jira stories, or there is a
yeah.
something
Sridhar,
called
Veritas, they don't use Jira. They use there's another tool within this DevOps, I guess, stack or Azure DevOps stack that's equivalent to Jira.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we don't have to go into it too deeply, but if you go back to the DevOps page, I think it's your second tab, right? And instead of the repo, if you go under boards, right, there's like, you can have
Okay.
backlogs and sprints and, all that kind of stuff, very similar to Jira or Asana, right?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. So here we call this as a work items. Yes, we can link the work items during deployment.
Which is great, because you could say this deployment addresses, these work items, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can have
That's
like a snapshot of basically for example, user story, or the work item, the description, and then all the obviously like deployments that were done. So it's very helpful. Yeah.
For Elijah, Guillaume, and Sebastian, who also joined the call, this would be similar in like, we use monday.com currently to kind of track our projects and tasks. If we moved that to Azure DevOps, then when you checked in code to the repository and pushed it around to the different environments, you could actually tag the task that you've completed to that check-in, right? So that if you wanted to, like a year from now, you're like, hey, remember when we did that, we released that feature, you could actually go back and find out which commit that was associated with, and validate like what code assets or metadata changes you made to the organization along with those feature changes, which could be pretty useful.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty awesome.
So with this, my demo is done. So I have explained creation of CI/CD job. Then my final one is this one, development and deployment process. So basically, I want to explain about this.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a workflow, how a deployment happens from development. So a developer will be creating a feature branch from master, and he's going to link that with a sandbox from VS Code. Then he's going to commit the code to UAT branch. Basically, it's in Azure DevOps repository. Then CI/CD job will starts automatic deployment from UAT branch to UAT sandbox, and users test the application and gives the sign off. Once sign off is done, code will be moved from UAT branch to master branch using Gearset. And once we move the code to master branch, again the CI/CD job will step in here and will do automatic deployment to production. So this is the complete workflow, how it will be.
Yeah, so just to kind of translate for Veritas's use case, right? Like this would replace like our practice, like currently, we do a lot of our development directly in production, right? Which is, you know, kind of a poor practice from an environment management standpoint. And so this is sort of a much more rigorous, you know, more structured process where effectively, you know, we're always making sure that our UAT sandbox is representative of production, you know, plus any changes that we're testing. And then the CI/CD part of this, right? Continuous integration, continuous deployment. You know, for those who aren't familiar with that term, means that like we're always integrating those changes into production rather than sort of having, you know, a bunch of changes sitting out there waiting to be deployed and then becoming stale and then, you know, irrelevant over time, right? Like, you know, we're always making sure that we're kind of pushing those changes and managing the environment to be as up to date as possible.
Yes, Matt, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
So actually, this is more simplified process which I have designed here. Actually, when we have develop, our team size is big, so there will be we can introduce a few more steps like SIT, system integration, sandbox, and QA sandbox, then UAT sandbox, staging sandbox. Like that, there will be so many steps for big team. Actually, I think we are very small team in Veritas, so I think this process should work for that.
Yeah, I think so. I don't want to overly complicate it because then it just creates a lot of confusion. But this is, I think, this is a great process to start with. The one thing that I'm just not quite so clear on is like, so you know, you'd have those sandboxes like sandbox 1 and 2 on the left side of the diagram. Those would be typically developer sandboxes, right? As opposed to like a partial or full copy sandbox that your UAT environment would be. Is that correct?
Yes, Matt, it's correct.
And then I guess, would you ever have a case where multiple developers would be working in one of those feature branch sandboxes at the same time, or would they always have their own?
Yeah, there might be such cases.
Yeah, I can kind of chime in on that too. It really depends, because I've seen different scenarios across different companies, and the reason being is because if you have like, for example, maybe some complex implementation of, let's say, like Salesforce CPQ with multiple integrations, you cannot have multiple environments for each developer because it's hard to replicate that.
Yeah, there's so much that you need to be able to test. And so
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of that use case where, you know, you're creating a feature branch, but you have multiple people working on that feature branch. Then
well, feature branch, yeah, I think in that case, each developer should have their own branch. So just what I'm trying to differentiate is like branches versus the environment.
Right.
Yeah, so I think like in general, like feature branch should be, I wouldn't have like two developers work on the same feature branch.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my thought, just because I think it would be easier than to manage the overall process. I don't know what Sridhar thinks, but it kind of varies, I think, now that I'm looking back at it.
Yeah, maybe those are things that we tackle when we run into them. I'm just curious, so that the one last part that I'd need to fill in is like, so if you've got a you're working in a developer sandbox on a feature branch, and somebody else is working in a different sandbox working on a different feature branch, they merge their features into the UAT branch and eventually the master branch. How did then I pick up the changes back to my sandbox? So I'm like, you know, when I go to commit my feature branch, I'm not like out of date in terms of like the other stuff that's been committed.
So in general, that's where the Git process kicks in with version control.
Right. So I would
yeah.
pull those changes into my into my feature branch.
Yeah, you would have to pull these. So for example, if, to give you an example, like let's say you work in a 2-week sprint, you know, so you would do a release maybe, let's say on the last day of the sprint on a Friday, then I know by Monday, then I need to basically, I have basically a new deployment in place. So that, then I need like a new branch that I need to create for the next sprint. So I'm going to create it off of the main branch that has been updated.
Right.
But then at the same time, if I'm using the same whatever branch for whatever reason, if I do a Git pull, I'm going to pull all the changes that were pushed by different developers to the main branch. That's one part. The second part that you kind of touched on is if I'm working my own sandbox, that's the kind of the cost of having your own sandbox, is that you have to make sure that you maintain it. That
Right.
means is that you have always the fresh copy of the metadata that might have been deployed. I think that's where the cadence of deployments is very important too, is because that way you know exactly what has been changed, and then when you need to sort of maybe refresh your other environment or stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, but
it's more of a
mhm.
process and procedure kind of
Yeah.
thing where you're you know, coordinating
Yeah.
with other developers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of two-part really, like working with Git, it's like any other environment, you know, there's a lot of sort of, I mean, there's a whole manual on like Git version
Yeah.
control and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff there. But in this world of Salesforce, what's also important to understand how each basically main branch connects to each environment. And then I think that's a little bit of, where it requires a little bit of sort of maybe training and for everyone to get it kind of used to that environment.
Yeah, it sounds like,
Yeah,
you know, like gaining a solid understanding of how Git works and different branches and merging works.
yeah,
Getting those fundamentals first before attempting to do this is pretty crucial.
Yeah, because for example, if you as a developer have not worked with Git, and if you just coded inside of like a Salesforce dev console, it's a major adjustment to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is great information. I really appreciate the you know, the time and effort you put into developing this.
And guys,